From Mark Coughlin. I'm joined now in studio by Labour Senator Lorraine Higgins and Socialist Party TD Ruth Coppinger. Ruth Coppinger, the 5 people who were jailed, or 4 were jailed and one, the order was stayed for a couple of days. But the 5 individuals knew what they were doing, they knew what the consequences were, they knew this was inevitable if they kept doing what they were doing, didn't they?
Well, what they were doing was peacefully protesting in communities where meters were being installed. These are meters of no benefit to them or to residents who are having them imposed on them against their will. They're only of benefit to one company, GMC Sierra, owned by Ireland's richest man. He's a tax exile, by the way. And, by the way, none of the people who were charged for any sort of violence or abuse. I think that needs to be made very clear.
If you don't mind, that's not the question, actually.
No, but it's very important that that's known by people. What they were charged with was breaching an injunction.
Yes, and the judge said
20 metres within.
Yeah, the judge said he saw evidence of harassment and intimidation. He said the people involved were harassing, obstructing and doing everything they could to prevent works being carried out, and the actions were unfair and cowardly. That's what the judge said after seeing the evidence.
Well, none of the charges are in any way held up. What held up was that they stood within 20 metres of a metre.
They broke a court order.
Can I just say, there's outrage around the country at what has happened tonight. A Rubicon has been crossed, particularly for the likes of the Labour Party, whereby residents protesting in their communities against an austerity measure, against the hated water charges, have now been jailed, combined with the dawn raids that took place in Tallaght during the week. It's unbelievable. It's already been pointed out. No banker, no developer who brought the country to financial ruin.
I'm going to raise those points with Lorraine Higgins in a moment, but if I could just stick with the point here, which is that there was a court order. These people knew that there was a court order, and they knew these were the potential consequences. And I think their barrister said they were aware of the court's order, they were aware of the potential consequences. So if they knew what they were doing and they knew that this was inevitable if they kept doing it, it's difficult to see.
And they're right to do it, because an injunction imposed in the interest of a big business against the democratic will of the majority of people who oppose the water charges in this country, they were perfectly within their rights to continue to protest. This was an attempt to break an effective protest, a peaceful protest, and we have to defend the right to protest.
But the point that the judge made in court today was that the workers involved have a right, a constitutional right, to go about their lawful business.
Yeah, they do, but there's no mandate for the introduction of the water meters or water charges.
Can I just legally, that's not the point, because legally the point is that there is a constitutional right for the workers to do their job, and there's a constitutional obligation on the people who were jailed today to obey an injunction of the court.
And there's a right for communities to protest as well against austerity and against the water charges. And unjust laws have always had to be challenged in this country.
So an unjust law can be broken.
And I tell you, I think what's going to happen now is on Saturday at 2 o'clock at the Central Bank, communities are going to converge from all around Dublin, from around Leinster and many areas to protest at what's going on, because they can see that there's one law for the rich and another for the poor.
Well, can I put that point to Lorraine Higgins? You're a representative here of the Labour Party, and a lot of people will be agreeing with exactly what Ruth Coppinger is saying. No regulator, no politician, no banker has had their collar felt or sent to prison, but these protesters straight off to the joy with them.
Well, that is a very fair point, David. There's no question about that. But there is a deficit in our legislative armour when it comes to legislation and enacting it in order to cover off these eventualities.
Well, that's the fault of the Oireachtas for introducing laws that can be used against protesters, but not introducing laws that can be used against the rich.
This is something that we have to look at. This is something that we have to look at. But we have to look at what happened today. When it came to the protesters, they weren't jailed for peacefully protesting. They were jailed for stopping people working. There's laws of this land that need to be upheld, and they quite willfully broke those laws, knowing what the sanctions were going to be, and we cannot act with impunity, and the courts can't either. And the judge had given them every possibility to evade jail.
But these people, in fairness, Senator, I mean, these people may well feel that they've no other option because they feel the government simply isn't listening to them, and some of them may well have voted for your party in the last election on the understanding that you were completely opposed to the introduction of water charges.
Well, do you not think, David, that their voices have been heard? The large majority of people who went out and protested back in October, there were 100,000 people on the streets. We acted on foot of those protests. They then were whittled down to 50,000 people on the streets in December, 15,000 people on the streets a number of weeks ago.
I don't want to get into a numbers game, because you can argue that either way.
But it it is very important. We have to see the way it's falling off.
But speaking of numbers, speaking of numbers, realistically, the authorities can't lock everybody up. There isn't enough space in the prison.
Well, not everybody is looking to bend the laws of this land. The protesters that were jailed today are those that were walking within 20 metres of the installation. They were well aware of the injunction that was in place. Some of them were given a suspended sentence last November. They chose to ignore that and willfully ignore that. And it's too bad that people will be going about their work for Irish Water and will be in a situation where they feel intimidated and harassed on a daily basis as a result of the actions of these people. Because you have to remember, David, you know, when these matters...
As Ruth Coppinger pointed out, like, this is an injunction about coming within a certain distance of people. It seems a bit draconian, doesn't it?
Well, it was the only answer, obviously, that the judge, who's absolutely impartial, came up with. And at the end of the day, you know, this had to be proven beyond all reasonable doubt in order to jail the protesters today. And obviously the evidence was such that it satisfied that threshold.
What people have seen in the last week is political policing of communities around Dublin, and this will be implemented.
Well, 2 of the 7 people that were in front of the court were let out.
The separation of powers doctrine.
The idea that there's a separation now between the government, the courts and the Gardaí is absolutely
why were 2 of the 7 accused let off?
Because they couldn't substantiate the charges.
So there was evidence against the other 5?
The evidence was video evidence of them standing near a water meter, and we can get bogged down here, but that is the actual charge that was brought against them.
Yeah, but there was evidence against them.
The key point is, Lorraine Higgins has said something unbelievable. Your party went and spent hundreds of thousands of euros saying that you were opposed to water charges. You went into government and you betrayed people in an unbelievably cynical fashion. And you're turning around tonight saying, oh, it's too bad that residents are in jail.
It's part of the memorandum.
It's your fault that residents are in jail.
It's part of the memorandum of understanding with the IMF. You well remember that.
Why did you have it in your platform in the last election then?
Well, you know, when parties go into coalition, there's give and take, and at the end of the day, you know, it was a situation which was part of the IMF deal. We had to honour that, unfortunately.
But why did you say in your election manifesto that you wouldn't?
Well, this was a situation, as I said, that it was beyond our control. Ultimately, these
so
things
what's the
happen.
point of being in government?
These things happen, David. But we didn't have economic sovereignty in this country whatsoever. We have restored child benefit. We've increased it. We've taken 320,000 people out of the universal social charge. But I deal in facts, not fairy tales, Ruth.
The fact is the child benefit has been
increased.
And the Labour Party
was increased in the budget.
Going around. It was increased by €5 when €25 was taken in the last numbers. Lorraine, let's be honest, people aren't stupid. Labour in particular has betrayed people. And you said there that this will somehow cow people. It won't. In March the 21st, there'll be a massive, I'd say the biggest protest ever, and on Saturday as well.
You've got that in Lorraine.
Well, given the fact that your protest figures have dwindled off from 100,000 back last October down to 15,000 in recent weeks, I'm meeting people on the ground in Galway East. It's now no longer the issue you think it is.
Lorraine, people will boycott the water.
We will find out. I'm afraid we have to. I'm afraid
the Labour Party en masse as well.
I'm afraid we have to leave it there. But Deputy Senator, thank you, Miriam.
That's it for tonight. You can